Hello guys! How's it going? It's Thursday, October 10th, 2019, and I hope that you're doing well today, whether it's Friday, October 11th, when you're watching this, if you're watching it in real time, or whenever it is that you are watching this video. I really hope that you're doing good. I'm doing okay. Thanks for asking. I have a lot of fun things planned in the next coming weekends. Two weddings in 2 weeks. I am so excited to celebrate love. I love love. But today, we're not really going to be talking about the most cheery of topics. Today we're going to be talking about shame. And the first thing that I want to say about shame, just diving right into it, is I heard a distinction recently between shame and guilt. And that was, starting with guilt, that you feel guilt when you think you did something bad. And you're like, oh man, that was a bad thing to do. Shame, on the other hand, is when you identify with that behavior. When you're like, I'm a bad person. I did that and I'm, oh God, like I'm just not good. What the fuck was that? Like, why do I do this? That's shame. Whereas guilt is a little bit more rational. It's like, oh, that wasn't the smartest thing. Maybe if I had done that just a little bit differently, it would have turned out completely differently and would have been okay. But shame, it's like this vortex spiral into irrational ridiculousness. And what really got me thinking about this was my last video on not being so hard on ourselves. But it's kind of easier said than done to not be so hard on ourselves, because it's such a natural response for some of us who, I think maybe you can relate, were raised in this environment where maybe we were shamed, or around people who shamed themselves, or who just had this air of like lack of integrity. They like tried to be one thing but then they weren't, and there was just this negative atmosphere that emanates from that not being in total alignment. So maybe you watch that video and you're like, okay, stop being so hard on myself, but how? And I kind of want to expand on that. And I think it's pretty scientifically proven, this tidbit of information that I'm going to share with you today. So there's this thing called neurological pruning. You have these neurons in your brain that connect, and so there's a stimuli and then there's a reaction, and like energy flows through that feedback loop. If you have the same stimuli and get used to reacting to it with the same response, so for instance, you do something that's not like on par in your opinion. Say, for example, you have a bad hair day. That sounds silly, but I think some of us are hard on ourselves for how we look. It goes deeper than just having a bad hair day. You don't think that you're good enough in some way or another. Or you do something like maybe overeat, or you do something like rage on a friend of yours, whatever it is. Something happens and you have this shame response, this being really hard and critical on yourself response. Or someone does something and you have this response to be hyper vigilant of it, and you're like, why did they do that? And your mind kind of spirals in a negative, assuming direction rather than being unassuming and assuming positive intent, if anything. There's a lot of ways that this can be applied. Finding dissatisfaction in life. We were raised by dissatisfied people and we inherited this incessant dissatisfaction, this negativity, this victimhood, whatever it is. You have that response, and the more it occurs, the stronger and stronger and stronger it becomes, that response. And neurological pruning is when other responses to that same stimuli, other responses being self-compassion or being unassuming, being observing, being in the moment, being okay. Those responses, because they're not being used as often, instead these responses are being used, these shameful responses are being used. Those responses, the good ones, are pruned. They're used less and less, they weaken, while the other ones are used more and more and they strengthen. So this idea of neurological pruning is the more you use a certain perception and behavior, the stronger it becomes. I want you to know that while some of your responses are maladaptive, and we all have maladaptive ways of viewing the world, except for maybe, I don't know, Ram Dass, some enlightened you can use this to your advantage, this neurological pruning. Big terms, right? You can become more aware of what's happening, of these feedback loops, and instead of feeding into them, feed into more positive ones. So say something happens and you have that shame response. I don't think it's possible to like magically go straight to having a positive response. But if you become more aware of that happening, you can consciously go back and say, okay, I'm doing okay, I'm safe, I'm cared for by myself, by the universe, by whoever, hopefully someone, and I am an equal here on earth. I'm good. You know, reinforce positive feedback loops, and the neurological pruning will prune away all of these shameful responses. And a lot of what I preach on my channel isn't overnight success. It's not over a fortnight success, but over a year and over 5 years, change happens if you continuously practice looking on the bright side and feeding these positive perspectives rather than old, outdated, negative ones that we were just learned, that were inherited, they're not ours. Let them go and make space for the new you. I want to make another note on shame here. I've experienced a lot of it this summer, and I think prior to that I was kind of numbing myself to it, to that self-shaming, and I just fully let myself submerge in that feeling many times this summer. Unfortunately, it comes as we take full responsibility for our lives, which is something that I have been doing this summer, more so than ever. I think it naturally comes as a person matures, not just people who have been through rough stuff, but everyone. You take responsibility for what is and for what's going to be. Hi, babe. So personally, a couple years ago, I discovered what narcissism really is. Not this random definition in a DSM-5, but in a conversation, talking to someone about my mom. And them saying, wow, that sounds like my mom. We should talk about this because it doesn't sound healthy and I think I know what's going on. And you know, realizing that, because it's always been kind of a secret. I've always been so just trying to keep the peace through accepting being gaslighted and feeling uncertain and less than. And then I discovered adult child syndrome, the result of all of those things that I did, that I dealt with, and I was angry and I was blaming people. I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is why. That can no longer be a part of my situation, a part of my equation, because whoa, that's not okay. And so I went no contact, and I found distance from my mom, the core root of the problem in my eyes at that time. And then something happened with someone else in my family, and it was terrible, really, really bad. And then, you know, something else terrible happened, and it's just crazy. My family is just like always a source of this distress. But I realized that in cutting people out, you know, that whatever was happening with any of them and with anything outside of myself, that really wasn't the root of the problem. The root of the problem was me. I am doing things and thinking things that are continuously fueling this distress, this upset. And that, my friend, was like taking the red pill in the Matrix. Take the blue pill, go to sleep forever. Take the red pill, wake the fuck up. And I woke the fuck up. And I left for the summer. And I didn't expect to be back so soon. I don't think I was ready to be back, but I guess I am. To be done with school. And like, I feel like I'm in the midst of labor. If life is like, I feel like this was all gestation, like growing inside a womb as a fetus, and then like now I'm in labor. Not me, but I'm like a child about to be born. Like I feel like, wow, I guess it doesn't matter. But this summer was really, really, really hard because I was coming to terms with all of my personal inner stuff. Not stuff. Shit. It was really hard. And it brought a lot of shame. And I think that's the very actual issue. All the stuff I'm doing is a cause of shame. And that is rooted in my just not feeling like I'm good enough as I am, and like I'm playing with my hair because I don't want to talk about this because it's depressing. Just washed my hair. This is what I look like when I get out of the shower. So while personally, it wasn't even an option to stay in victim land or like Pollyanna, fantasy land. For me, it was like, the reality is the only person who I'm with 24/7 is myself, and I have control over myself and no one else, and I need to let that go, let all that go, and focus on what's happening in here. And what's going on in there isn't all bunnies and rainbows and sunshine. Much of the time it is, I promise you. I can be a very light and bright human. Most of the time I feel like I am. But there is also quite a bit of the time when I'm not. And, you know, some days I just wake up and I'm not. I am very habitually, a habit is something you do without thinking, just habitually used to not feeling good for various reasons and in various ways that are on this loop inside my brain. And becoming so fully aware of it was kind of painful. And a lot of it was about shame. It was very shameful. But I want to let you know that I'm coming around to the other side of this whole process. And like I said in the beginning, more so towards the beginning of this video, change doesn't happen in a night or in a fortnight. It happens in a year. A year ago, I was so confused and still in this foggy way of life, living, making decisions out of fear, obligation, and guilt. And now I'm out of that, and now I'm like kind of in shame. And I have so much faith that I'm going to move beyond that as well. And I have faith that you are too. Hello. So there's a couple things that I want to leave you with at the end of this video, and the first is that it's always so helpful to just practice separating self from behavior. So instead of feeling shame, feel guilt is what I'm saying. And that's not maybe the most positive shift, but it maybe is more realistic than moving from feeling shameful or guilty, however you label whatever feelings. Ouch. Your claws. How much do you love treats? Oh my god, that was so many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Too many treats. Instead of identifying with things that you do that you don't approve of, start to see it as just a behavior, just something that you do that you don't have to do. It's very much so in your control to change how you live and how you act and how you respond, even to people who come at you and make you feel certain ways. You can choose to see that as a projection and as not reality, as just a simple pathway of reality that you can choose to turn away from and walk a different way. But another thing that's been really helpful for me in moving beyond these feelings is opening up about them and being vulnerable rather than alone in secrecy and in shame. And I'm not exactly sure why this helps so much. I think a few reasons are because you're not alone in it. Both other people feel the same ways, maybe not at the same time, but they've definitely experienced a similar experience. And also because they can help you realize that you're not a bad person, which is exactly the whole thing I'm trying to portray to you today. Is we sometimes identify with things that we do and think that we're bad people, but it's not the truth. We're not bad people. Yikes, I don't know if I ran out of battery or space, but I'm gonna cut it short here. Get vulnerable, open up to people, and they can tell you that you're not bad. They can tell you that they've been through similar things. They can tell you that it's gonna be okay. Open up, stop identifying with some of the badder things that you think you do. Stop being so freaking hard on yourself. Link to that video here. Subscribe to my channel here. And please try to enjoy your life. You only get one, as far as we know. So I hope you have a fantastic weekend or day whenever you're watching this video, and I will talk to you soon. Hope that you gained something or other from this video, and I love you. I really do. You're loved, you're cared for. Peace.